and they're like,
Yeah.
they become Italy's #1 bike maker. Basically, it was a really interesting story. But
Yeah. There's a lot of history with Ducatis with racing, like the company. I guess similar to Ferraris.
yeah,
There's a lot of history with racing with Ducatis, especially with the engines. How
right,
the engines are built. You know, you know, back in the day when the engines were kind of revving so high,
hmm
the valves would float because the springs didn't have good, like the steel
right,
wasn't that good and whatnot. And to get around that, Ducati decided to put not to get rid of the spring and to actually force the valve shut, like you
right,
force them open
right.
with cams.
It's got a weird name, the durometric. Oh man, I can't think.
Desmotronic.
Desmotronic. Yes.
Desmotronic, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of the one of the reason why when, especially the older Ducatis, when you
Mhm.
hear them running, like you hear a lot of clunking. It
Right.
sounds like there's a dishwasher running with broken glass in it. Like
Right, because
there's a
they have a dry clutch too, right? It's not an oil-based clutch, so between the clutch and it makes a very distinct
yeah,
Ducati
it does.
sound.
It does. I mean, it's with the newer models, it's you don't hear it as much. You've got variable valve timing and whatnot, so it's much smoother. But
Right.
yeah, you can still hear some of it, and that's one of the reasons why there's also like you know it's reliable, but you have to maintain it really well. When you
Yeah.
do maintain it, it tends to cost a little much more, a little higher because of that, right?
Yeah.
You got more valves to check, you got more timings, right? So
Right. Right. Yeah, it was also really fascinating to me. I didn't realize I'm kind of somewhat new to the whole F1
mhm.
MotoGP scene. Funny enough, I started watching Netflix's series on F1 and just got completely pulled into it. But the idea of homogalate, what do they call it? Basically, the idea that they, in order to compete at like the World Superbike level, they
Mhm.
have to have bikes that are basically street bikes, and so they
Yep.
have to take MotoGP bikes and make them in such a way that they sell 5,000 of them or something
Yeah,
before
there's a
they can.
number of that bike needs to be like you said, like a commercial bike, and they have
Yeah,
to sell up to a certain amount.
yeah. So they've got like the Panigale, which is like a
Mhm.
$40,000 basically
Yep.
MotoGP bike that you can buy
Yeah.
off the shelf. So
Yeah, the
yeah,
really high end, I mean, it's crazy. Carbon fiber wheels, carbon fiber frames.
yeah,
It's yeah.
yeah. Hey, it looks like we've got a number of people joining in on the
Yeah,
chat. Shell and I are
cool.
just having a little conversation about MotoGP and F1. So we'll be getting started here soon. Looks like I mean, Michelle, looks like we just got an invitation to come down and watch the Formula One races
Oh,
down in
really?
Austin. So,
Oh, I might
that
take
would
you up
be
on that.
that would be amazing. I might take you up on that as well. So, but have you seen the F1 series that Netflix has?
I haven't gone through it yet. Yet. I'm just saying yet. So,
Yeah, yeah, it's quite interesting for sure. And it's been fun to then just be able to follow a lot of the stuff this year then as well.
yeah.
Big
I
shakeup
also
that's
like the 24-hour Le Mans.
yeah,
I think I watched maybe a series couple years ago. I think it was on Netflix too. It
yeah,
was pretty nice too.
yeah.
A whole different type of race, right?
Right, right.
So, um,
The the Ford versus Ferrari. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but
oh
that's
yeah,
that's a
yeah.
really great movie. But anyway, yeah, it's
Well, the
it's really
movie's
cool.
good, but there's a documentary also on Netflix that kind of runs you through the actual history of it,
Oh,
and then
really?
goes in a little deeper in the details of well, the deal that Ferrari tried to do with Ford, and it was really just to try to get Fiat to get get more better buy for Fiat, or so there's a lot of back end story that you get in the documentary, which is really good too.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. Well, hey, if you are just joining us, we, my colleague and friend Michel Cloutier and I are just having a little conversation about MotoGP, F1, all those fun things. If you have a favorite driver or a constructor team that you like, maybe put it in the chat. Let us know. We've already got an invite down to Austin to see the F1 races, so we're pretty excited about that. But welcome to Live Design. If this is your first time, we're really glad to have you, and we want to make sure that you feel part of the team, part of the conversation here. So as we go through today, please feel free to enter in any questions that you have throughout today, and I'll do my best to answer them, or to make sure that Michelle gets them and can hopefully get you an answer. Michelle, maybe take a few minutes to just introduce yourself.
Yes, well, I'm a machine designer by trade, and I've been at SOLIDWORKS now for 16 years as a consultant. So really my job is to try to talk with as much a customer as I can, understand what they do, how they do it, and how we can help.
That's awesome. So you're going to take us through structure systems today, right? Awesome. Yep. That's going to be great, because I know you and I had a conversation a week or so ago about this is pretty prevalent where you're at, this idea of building up these welded tubular structures. Yeah.
So, I mean, like I said, I'm a machine designer by trade. So I've designed and, had, some of those, machine design with frames, and I've been using Weldments inside of SOLIDWORKS for years now. But structure system is a bit of a different beast. It's part of SOLIDWORKS since 2019, and the way I describe Weldments versus structure system is that Weldments, you're probably going to build a frame in the shop for whatever purpose and then ship the whole machine, whereas structure system, you're probably going to build pieces of it and then assemble on site because it's just way too big.
Got it.
People have been using Weldments to do both, but since 2019, like I said, the structure system kind of complements that area of Weldments, where it gets to a point where it's so big and kind of so, don't want to say hard to manage, but can be challenging to design because of the size of the structure itself.
Well, I'm excited to get into this since it's just you and I on this call. I'll let you know that I have not played with structure systems a lot, so I'm actually quite excited to have you go through this with us. So let's get into it.
All right. So let's jump in. So I'll do like two different examples that I want to run through that kind of highlight most of the capabilities of structure system. And like I said, structure system is not replacing Weldments, it's a complement to Weldments, right?
Okay.
The first step, so this is actually a shape of a structure. So before I start doing anything, maybe just kind of look at how I've created this. So this is actually like a structure I want to build that's kind of look like a cage. And when you look at this and you look at the dimensions, I'm in millimeters right now. So that's 14 meters. So that would roughly be like 40 feet in diameter, I would think, right? So just to give you a size, kind of sense of how big this is.
Yep. And
then, it's kind of 14 meters high. So it's a fairly big structure. And you'll notice that I have two things here. I have basically two surfaces and then one sketch. Now, that's really one of the first differentiators with structure system, is that you can use more than sketches to design the weldment.
Okay.
So for example, if I would try to do this with regular weldment, I would need to have sketched everything, all the edges and whatnot. Everything would need to be sketched. So
Right.
let's
The
take a
other
look
the other thing real quick, Michelle, that I'm noticing is you're in a
Yep.
you're in a apartment, right?
Yes.
So okay, so we're basically talking like multi-body design at this point.
Yeah, just like weldments, traditional weldments for that matter. So yes, it's a regular part model. Right?
Okay.
So the first thing, well, if you don't have structure system, I like to use the tabs on top. If you don't have them enabled, you just simply right click, go on tabs, and turn on structure system. Again, if you have SOLIDWORKS 2019 or above, it's there. And the way it works is that you first got to, structure system itself is like a design environment. So you get in, and then you start doing something. Think of it like when you're sketching, you're in the sketching environment, right? So with structure system, you get into the environment, and then you're going to see this. You're going to see primary members and secondary members. Again, just to kind of make things clear, primary members is something you're going to add with geometry that's existing, like sketches, but also edges. Secondary members you can use without any geometry existing, which is kind of neat. So in this
example, I don't
example,
have to have any sketches or anything like that. You can just basically apply them.
Yes, not for secondary members, right?
Oh, right, right, okay.
So you got to have something to start for primary members, and that's what we're going to do now. So I'm in the structure system environment. I go to primary members, and then that's the other big difference with traditional weldments is that we can use a lot more types of entities to create or assign or put the beams in place. And in traditional weldments, like I said earlier, it's always a sketch. You always need a sketch to do anything. Here, what I can do is I'll filter my model edges and I'll just window select everything. Now, those are not sketches, those are edges, right? So just think of how much work that would have needed if you ought to sketch everything. So I've got 36 edges selected. So
yeah, I think, well, and that's a really great point, because I think my background's machine design too, and the 3D sketches have always been really powerful, but I mean, if I'm honest, they get a little unwieldy sometimes when you get into this.
That's one of the things, because you've got so much sketching to do that sometimes the sketch relations are kind of hard to manage at some point. Right. Here, I just got a model. So, you want to make a frame of, that looks like a box, you just model a cube, pick all the edges, and basically you're done, right? Nice. So it's a great way to do things very quickly. Now, very similar to weldments, you're going to be able to go in and select the different profiles you want to use, right? So we're kind of basically using the same, pull down menus as you would with traditional weldments. Here I want to use, square tubes, 10 by 10, and you got the preview updates, everything looks good. One note about the profiles, however. So if you've been a really long time SOLIDWORKS user, when we initially started Weldments, there's two types of standards for profiles. There's the file-based and configuration-based profile. Right. So in the first case, this is, if we go back all the way back to 2006, I think, when we first introduced Weldments, we had one file for every type of profile and for every dimension of profile. That's
right, yeah.
And then over the years, we introduced configuration-based profile, where you could use one profile, but in that profile library, all the sizes were in the same as configurations. For weldment, for structure systems, you have to use the latter one, the configuration-based.
The configs.
So if you're still using the traditional file-based, you'll have to kind of migrate, but I think you'll see the advantages of doing so real quick.
Right. Right. Real quick, if you have questions for Michelle, please feel free to put them into the chat. I'll do my best to convey them to him. And also, hopefully you saw the poll that popped up, whether or not you've used structure systems or not. That'll be a fun way for us to kind of get a sense of whether you've had a chance to play with them or not. So
cool. So one thing, so I've put all those beams. So you saw me put all those members, 36 of them, real quick. So I'm simply going to keep this visible and click OK, and that's going to bring me to another thing that is really interesting about structure system. Again, I'm relating back to traditional weldments. Like if you're using traditional weldments, you can create groups to help organize the different weldments and help also with how to trim them. But if you want to use a different size or even a different shape of member, it has to go in a different feature. You cannot do everything in one feature.
Okay.
That's on traditional weldments.
Right.
In the structure system, let's just say I want to have all those vertical beams to be something different than the what I want to say, the square tubing. I can just reselect them. I'm still in the structure system environment. I'm still in the structure system feature if you want, but I can go in and reselect what the beams I've already applied.
Okay.
And go back into the profile and say, you know what, those I'd really want to have those to be round, and I want those to be 10 inches in diameter, and it does what it does. So now I've got two different types of profile still within the same feature.
Okay, gotcha.
Right?
Yep.
Now let's go on. So you kind of see where I got this sketch. So this is a traditional sketch that kind of zigzags, and you can assume that's, I want to connect these two together. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm simply going to say, well, I want to have a member coming down here. So that would be kind of similar like a traditional weldment where I have a sketch to define it. But again, within the same weldment structure feature, I'm going to say I want this to be a different size. I want this to be smaller. So again, within the same feature, I now have two different shapes, three different sizes, which is pretty awesome. Like I'm still doing everything in the same feature, which is really cool.
Very cool.
So at this stage, and all of those I've been doing so far, I was using the primary member, right? Because I had some geometry to latch on. I had my model edges in the first case. I had the sketch in the second case, right?
Right.
Now, I want to also have, you see like the hexagon ring, I want to have another ring that kind of sits a little lower over here in the inside cage, but I don't have any geometry to support that. That's where the secondary member, comes in. And what I do here is that I'm going to say, well, you know what? I want to connect this beam, and there's a little chain option. I'm going to turn that on. So I want to connect this beam, this beam, this beam, this one, this one, this one, and that one. So you see they're all selected in the parameters here. And then I'm going to say, okay, so where do I want that new shape to land? So for that, I'm simply going to use a reference plane. And there's one.
And gotcha. So actually, this is a plane that you had predefined, prior to going through this, but easy enough to create. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. And I could, and you could even use the original, like the top plane, top right front plane if you want. But you see here, I don't have any existing geometry other than the reference plane, right? There's no sketches, there's no model edges. And that's where also that's where secondary members becomes really handy. You don't have to kind of have geometry. You can just say, okay, I'm going to just put, beams where I need them.
Gotcha. So Michelle, let me ask you a question real quick. Do you find yourself, I see you using the filter edges, filter sketch segments. Are those those come in or are pretty valuable when you're doing these types of structures?
Yeah, I mean, if you've taken the habit of, for complex structures, it's oftentimes really, it's easier to just create a model just so you have the edges and then populate the edges with the beam and just use it as a kind of a building block to get the shape, like this one
Gotcha.
here.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, I mean, you could always just, pick manually if there's a few. In this case, I knew I was going to kind of have to pick a lot, so I just had the sketch filters and the edge filters in my toolbar.
Gotcha.
But that's, yeah.
Okay.
So so I think we've got a good deal done already. But one thing you'll notice is that I haven't talked about how to trim the corners just yet. Right.
Right. I was
That's
wondering
going
about
to
that.
be a big part of doing this, right? Because I'm kind of just putting the beams where I want them, yeah, but there's no trimming that's been done yet. Now,
Okay.
when you use structure system, you place the beams, and when you exit the structure system environment, that's when you're going to be prompted to take care of the corners and how you want to take care of those corners.
Okay.
So I'm still in structure system. That's why I haven't seen anything regarding the corner management or the what we call the corner management tool. So when I'm going to exit, and you can exit by clicking the structure system, it's like a radio button, like a push button, or you can go exit out of here pretty much like you would exit out of a sketch. And then when you do, that's when you've got this tool here called the corner management, right?
Okay.
And that's going to guide you through how you want to deal with the corners. Now, when you look at this, there's actually, here we see two types, simple and complex. In reality, there might be up to 4 different types of corners, depending how they meet together. So to do things simple, a simple corner is basically when 2 beams meet, but only one of them needs to be trimmed.
Okay.
Then you could have a dual corner where 2 beams meet and both of them needs to be trimmed, and then a complex corner when 3 or more beams meet and 3 or more of them needs to be trimmed regarding to how you want them.
Gotcha.
So if you look at this here, so here's a good example. So I got 2 simple corners. You see one here. I can simply go to the option, and that's going to kind of default everything to the same thing, or I could simply click on the little button here to isolate this corner. But in this case, this corner, the other one is the one below. I don't want to have a planar trim. I want to have a body trim. So I simply click body trim, and then we're done. So that's going to take care of the simple corners.
Got it.
Now, if I go on the other tab, that's where I'm going to have more work to do because there's a lot of complex corners. And depending on the final shape you want, that's when you're going to decide how you want to order the trim. Now, there's a lot of them, so I'm going to do just one just to highlight. So if you select the little point, it kind of isolates this one, which is the third one.
Yeah.
And then you got all those options. And again, if you navigate, you can see which members is which, and which member do you want to trim, have a miter, and which one you just want to have a planar trim. So if I select like in this case, really what I want is for both square tubes to be mitered, and then for the cylindrical tube to just cut flush underneath it, right?
Right, that makes sense.
That would be the easiest way to manufacture this. It's going to be the easiest way to do it. So I'm going to select this body, which is the vertical beam that we see in blue, and I'm simply going to move it down to this box that says planar trim. So you see really quickly, now this one here is taken care of, right? So in this example, you would probably just go along and, kind of cherry pick all your beams and, just make sure that you've got everything selected. And then when you click OK, and then you exit out of the complete, structure system with the corner management tool, everything's done. Everything's done and set. So the corner is done, the trimming's done everywhere, and you're basically ready to go for the next step. Now,
so I'm going to interrupt you real quick because I just to recap, because I think that's a really important set of steps. I think making sure that users understand that you can click on each of those, basically those colored dots. Sometimes I think we forget that a lot of times when they're colored, a lot of times you can do things with them, and then basically adjusting the order until you get what you want in the preview in order to get the trim right.
Yep, exactly.
Got it. Okay.
So for simple corners, oftentimes you can just default all of them to the same thing. For complex corners, it's probably better just that you have a look around to make sure that it trims correctly. Now, if you do any mistake on that, though, you'll notice what's kind of populating in the tree, and I can just expand that a little bit. Everything it's still two features, right? So there's one feature for the structure system, there's another feature for the corner management. So what I mean by that is that if you mispicked, or if there's one corner that you don't like, you can still go in and edit those features and fix it, right? So it's not like a you're done kind of thing. You can actually go in and take care of fixing some of those if you need to.
So, Michelle, we've had a couple really good questions that have come in, and I'll pose them both to you. One of them you may be getting to a little bit later, but we had one come in that was asking about, do we still get the same type of cut list capabilities that come out of this? So that's one. You may be getting to that one in a little bit, but the second one is, from a general modeling strategy, is this something that could also be utilized for smaller weldment designs, or is it really geared towards these larger structures?
Yeah, we call it structure system, and it might leads to confusion. There's no like size, reference, or it's more of the complexity of the weldment itself. Then I feel like than it is the size. Like in many cases, the size is going to be kind of a factor to determine if you're doing traditional weldments or structure system.
Yeah.
But the size is not a guiding factor, whether you should use one or the other.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that Cutlass question, I want to tackle that. So I have it on this. It's 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Yeah. No, perfect. I just wanted to make sure we got it to you. So that's perfect.
Yeah. So let me just swap. So I did did the corners here for one part, but I just want to go to my almost finished model where all the corners are already trimmed, just to expose some more functionality. Like patterning. It's not because it's a structure system model that you use to do it. You can still use traditional patterns. Here I'm going to pattern the bodies for these cross braces. So I have an axis, just select and pick, and how many? 6 of them. Click OK. And yeah, to the question about Cutlass, which is a really great question, is in essence, it reacts the same way as a traditional weldment, right? So you do have a Cutlass, you do have the same options to update your Cutlass. If I go into my properties and I go in my Cutlass table, everything's there. So with regards to the Cutlass, if you're used to weldments and Cutlass and weldments, that's going to react the same way. You'll notice even in the feature tree, it's the same like weldment icon as well, like the weldment feature that determines that this is in fact a weldment. It's still the same icon. So the Cutlass kind of reacts the same way. If you got in your profiles, you already have the description in there. Well, the description is going to follow through here. As you can see, it picks up the length. It kind of gathers everything by quantity. So pretty much the same.
For Michelle, for users who maybe have been doing weldments, but they've been doing assemblies, maybe they weren't aware that we could do this multi-body approach. Where does the information, like the description, come from? Where does that get populated from as they're building this out?
So that's going to come in from the profile library, Remember
Okay.
when I started my weldment, I selected, well, I want this to be a square tube of 10 inches, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's actually similar to a part file that has only the sketch profile information,
Right.
but in that file, we also have the description. So that description
Okay.
gets populated here. That's where this is getting pulled from.
Okay. So the profile the profile file is where
Contains
you
the
would.
Yeah, that's what contains the description, for example.
Okay.
You could put other properties if you wanted to, but that's, in this case, that's where the description's coming from.
Okay. That's where got it. Understand.
Cool.
Perfect.
Good. So I did have another example, and I wanted to show that example as well because I want to highlight some more functionality. Again, this is, a fairly large structure. When we look at the footprint, this is in inches, so 540 inches. So fairly large, and it's going to be like a big circular, pattern. I'm gonna go again inside my structure system. I want to start, I don't have anything yet, so I kind of have to start by using primary members. And I'm going to just set my profiles up front so the preview kind of looks better. And then I want to highlight some more options. So you saw me in the earlier example, I was using model edges. I use sketch as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's some pretty neat options here that I can expose. So for example, I like one called up to point, where you can say, well, you know what, this is going to be like the summit of my structure, and I want to have a beam starting from here, from here, from here. So very quickly, you can create these types of profile.
That's awesome.
Which is, again, you have really like minimal, work to do to get there, right? You just
Right.
have points in space. Rather than doing that, maybe I want to say I want to have a point, and I can actually do like a little bit like a daisy chain. So I can say, yeah, just go, follow the dots. You've done that in coloring books when you were a kid, right? Follow the
Right.
dots. So
Yeah.
again, try doing something like this with traditional weldments. It's harder. Let's put it that way. But really what I want to do here, so let's get to work. And I want to say, well, I want to have a beam that's going to start down here. So let's zoom into my endpoint. Oops. So I want to have a beam that starts from here, from these 2 points. And it's going where? Up to this level, right? So this is simply a reference plane. So I want to have 2 beams going upright up to this level. If I wanted to, I could even give it a orientation using an existing geometry,
Right.
like you would do, like we can do that in like a boss extrude, where you want
Yep.
the extrude to be a little kind of sideways, so you can use a model edge or a sketch. So in this case, I'm going to simply throw in these 2 beams, right?
Yep.
And I'm going to say okay to that. And I'm simply going to jump directly into my secondary members, because now I want to connect these 2 beams together. Like you see the reference planes,
Right.
right? So I can pick the pair I want to connect. I want to connect these 2 pair together. And I want to have a beam here, 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 and here. All right.
Nice.
I can go in and change the profile. So I'll make that a little smaller. And then you're gonna, again, if you've been using weldments, you're gonna see some options that you're used to weldments, right? So let's say when you drop a profile, it always centers by default, right?
Yep.
But
Yep.
sometimes you want that profile to be sitting on top of the sketch or the point or the edge, or below, or maybe in a corner. Well, you can do that. You simply just go ahead and select the pierce point. So the model will reorient, so you see it from the end of the section. And very similar to traditional weldments, you have these points where you can select where the beam should actually pass through. So if I do that, you see the beam kind of went underneath my reference plane, which is what I wanted. If I zoom back to my previous view, you see that the beam is now sitting at the same height. This is what I wanted, so this is great. And I can, okay, I'll pin it because I want to add some more, but I'll simply pick okay to that. So I got these beams set up. Now the next step is I want to connect a cross brace going from one corner to the other, right? The challenge is I'm going to have to cut because there's beams in between, right? I can't just put a beam in there. I have to kind of cut them out as I'm going down. So I'm going to use this option and say I want to connect a beam from this one to this one. And now you see I got dimensions, right? So these are the dimensions from endpoint of the top beam and the dimension from the endpoint of the bottom beam.
Nice.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. So for example, this one, I want it to be 0 from that end. So I want it to be really corner to corner and 0 to that end. So it's still, so now it's there, it's positioned. It's not oriented correctly, but again, very similar to traditional weldments. I can say just go in and say, you know what, just turn this 90 degrees. There you go.
Nice. Nice.
Right? Now the last option, this one is going to be really interesting and useful for this example is, like I said, I need to split these beams here, right? This won't work. So I do have in the command the split member, and I'm going to say where. Well, I want to split here and I want to split there. And I'll click OK to that. And when I exit out, I'm going to be prompted for the corner management tool, right? So I can select my different options for the corner management tool. And if I go over here, you see I don't want a miter here. I really want like a flat trim or a planar trim, I should say. I got then the corners here for the complex trim. Everything looks good. So I just use the kind of the default for the rest, and I click OK.
Yeah.
And there you go.
That's amazing. I'm going to interrupt you again real quick. Just first off, thanks for everybody who submitted to the survey, Michelle. That's we had about 68% of the people on have not used the structure member. So this is great. Hopefully people are.
Well, that's why we do this, right? To kind of expose some of those tools.
A few tips and tricks, right? So we've had some great questions come in actually within the chat that I want to pose to you if we can at this point. One of them was the question came in about the templates and the custom properties, which I think we kind of talked about. But if you have maybe a standard part like a plate or something that has a standard hole pattern, can you insert it into the weldment and have it be part of the overall design?
I mean, nothing is preventing. I mean, at the end of the day, that's a part, right? It's a SolidWorks part. So you can repurpose that in an assembly and do whatever you want. You can cut holes and do things with it. I will say there's a couple cool. I don't want to spoil it, but there's some good stuff coming in 2022.
Yeah,
I don't know.
fair enough. Fair enough. I've seen some customers who have used the insert part into part, basically, where you can grab an existing body and then position it where it needs to be, which can be kind of handy. Do you know? This question came in. It kind of made me smile. Does this work with costing? Do you happen to know?
Not something I've tried.
Okay.
No.
Fair enough.
Sorry.
The other one, obviously, it's a weldment. Can we apply weld? Can we put the weld beads on? Does it work like the normal weldment environment?
I don't see why it wouldn't. It's like you just said. It's a weldment. At the end of the day, it's just a weldment. So.
Yeah, and what was it? 2 or 3 releases ago? It might even be more than that. We really kind of reworked the weld tool, and it's really slick, right? To be able to add those welds and those call outs. Last question, while we've got it here, can you incorporate weld gaps when you're doing the trimming and adding the members?
I don't know. Can I? I think you can. Oh yeah. Well, I'm not finished, so I'll take a look when I do the rest of it.
All right, fair enough.
You can.
Yeah. So
That's a good question.
so those that are online, please feel free to keep those questions coming in. We appreciate it. They're great. Hopefully you guys are picking up not only some awareness to the fact that you can do this, but maybe a few tips or tricks along the way as well.
Cool.
All right, Michelle, let's jump back in here. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was just about kind of done with this part. The only thing I wanted to kind of highlight when you zoom in, let me just, if we hide this, you'll notice that everything is trimmed, kind of neatly, exactly as I wanted. The other thing I wanted to highlight again is, the beam here is trimmed as well. So that was the split actually occurred where the beam is exactly, and like I don't have to do any rework on that, which is kind of cool.
Gotcha.
Right?
Gotcha.
So yeah, let's kind of step back into this and complete this, because I want to pattern it, and then once the pattern's done, I want to reconnect what I've patterned to make the structure complete. So if I just go ahead into my circular pattern, and again, I'll use my center axis right here. I'll do a pattern of 12. Now, I want to kind of pause here for 1 second. So when you look into bodies, so in my first example, if you remember, I had that crisscross, and I picked the bodies one by one because it was one feature, and I only wanted the bodies of that crisscross section to be patterned, not the whole thing.
Right.
Here, I do want the whole thing, right?
Yep.
So what I can do is, rather than selecting my bodies one at a time, I can select the whole structure system feature. Now that has multiple benefits. First, it's just easier to pick. You just do one pick rather than trying to select everything. The other thing is, if you go back in your feature to change the original structure system feature, you don't need to go back in the pattern to update the body. So for example, let's say I would go back to my original structure system feature, and I add new bodies. Like there's new members in that feature. If I use the body pattern, I have to go back into the circular pattern and select those bodies that I've just added, right?
Right. Yeah, because you've selected the bodies.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways, the bodies are just individual.
One.
Yeah, they're just individual items, right?
Exactly.
That exist. So you have to go, right. Okay.
And on the opposite end, if I go back in my original structure system and I remove some of those, now I'm going to get an error, if I use the body pattern, because now there's bodies missing, right? So the structure system pattern really allows you to just, do it and forget it. It's just a much easier way to do it when you can pattern the whole thing.
Got it.
Cool. And then, like I said, so I've got pretty sizable, structure so far, but I need to connect these frames or these ladders, what it looks like, together with another structure system feature. Now here, what's kind of interesting, and the point I wanted to get to, is that I'm going to go back into my structure system feature, but I have existing beams in here. I don't need to go to primary members again. I can jump directly to secondary members and say I want to connect these pairs together, right? Okay. So the very first structure system feature you create, you're going to need a primary member or a set of primary members to start with. Okay. But then if you're connecting to something existing, you don't need to create those primary members anymore. You can just go and say, okay, I want to connect between those secondary members, right? So you can, it's not the first time you need primary members, but not the second time, not the third time, not the fourth time if you ever get there.
Sure.
So here what I want to do is I want to select the pairs I want to connect together. So this is going to be one pair I'm connecting. This is going to be another pair. And you see here, they actually show as pair of members. Where do I want to have a beam? Well, I'm going to select my reference planes, the same one I used before, my levels, right?
Yeah.
Now, as before, you're going to notice that, again, they always land in the midpoint. Again, in this case, I don't want this to be centered. I want actually the beam to be underneath the plane, not in the middle of the plane.
Right.
So to fix that, I go in my profile. I just use my pierce point, and I want to say, well, you know what? You need to be kind of tucked in here. And you click OK if I zoom back, just to make sure everything looks good. Now I'm still in the structure system feature, right?
Yep.
So you see the pairs going down. So when I going to exit, I'm going to be prompted for the corner management tool, right? So that's my corner management tool. And however I want to deal with those corners is for me to decide. But I'll just use the default. Click OK.
Got it. Gosh, that's so, I don't know. It makes me smile because managing, when I was doing machine design, sometimes we had to build the structures that our material handling equipment was going to sit on, and just the amount of some of the frustration in kind of managing all these sketches and whatnot. Whereas here, it's obviously very visual and tangible because you can just click the member you want it to connect to and just give it some guidance on where it needs to be.
Yep.
And you're good to go. So man, this is very cool.
I will say this, like when it gets to a point where the complexity warrants it, it just makes so much sense to use structure system. It's just so easier, faster. It's easier to manage because you don't have, like you said, the sketches. Like I've seen weldments with very heavily, a lot of sketches. And if you have sketch that are too complex, you can break stuff.
Yeah.
Fairly, you can end up with some errors, which you can alleviate a lot of that using structure system, just using reference geometry.
So Michelle, Jeff in the comments was just reminding me, one of the things we were going to look at in the feature is whether or not we could incorporate weld gap in the connections.
I don't believe so. I'll have to follow up. Like I was using the corner system, the corner management tool, and was kind of looking for weld gap options. I don't believe it is. I'll follow up on that.
Okay. And then we had another question come in. Does it, if you do decide to sketch, can you do, or I guess have an edge that's curved? Will the member work on a curved sketch or edge as well?
On an arc, yes. Not on a spline, but something arc, that will work.
Great. Yeah. Perfect.
So, I mean, if we just want to kind of wrap things up real quick, I don't know if there were any questions, but I'm kind of wrapping up right now, so we can take time to answer those after. But, the only thing I would do next, kind of to finish this, is say, well, you know what? I want to do another circular pattern, but this time of the second structure system feature, right?
Yeah.
And when I do the pattern, the other nice thing about doing those patterns is it also pulls in the corner management, however I use the corner management tool to do it, right? So, I mean, just think of how you would have, like, I look at this example and I think, how would I have done that with regular weldments? And it would take some planning ahead, and just to give you a sense of what we've accomplished. And we've been kind of chatting and discussing and answering questions and whatnot, but I've put in 204 beam members in basically two structure system features and two patterns. You know, that's how fast it was to create all of that. And again, with a cut list, that I can easily pull in, put it in a drawing, and off we go.
So you know, we've brought this cut list up a couple times. Again, maybe for the users who are looking at weldments in general for the first time, is this cut list available to be put on a drawing if they wanna you know, obviously detail out the structure?
Yep. So when you create your drawing, you put the model, the part inside your drawing, and you insert table. It's going to be in the table option. There's a cut list option, and you just pull it in, and it actually. This is what I like to do when I work in Weldments, right? So you can go into that cut list, and you'll notice I've got the option to update automatically and to create my cut list. I can expand, and I can actually go into each of the beams and see where they are. I can also kind of start populating my cut list, right? Okay. So this are the properties of all the different beams. You see, you know, I can pull in length, angle rotation. There's a lot of, you know, values I can pull it into my cut list. Maybe I don't need all of that. But the last tab here, which is the cut list table, is actually how it's going to look when you put it on the drawing, right?
Right. Okay.
So if you feel like you know, sometimes you'll put in I don't know, like a gusset, a plate that you'll model, you know, manually, and you'll just add it to there, and there's not going to be any description. Well, before going into a drawing and having to notice that you've got something missing in your cut list, you can actually take care of that here. So that tab here, the Cutlass Table Tab, actually shows you exactly how the cut list is going to look on your drawing. So you can see if you want to do any changes. You can go into your properties and, you know, kind of fill in the blanks. So for example, my description, I want to use another description. I could change it in here, and that would reflect in my cut list.
Got it. Okay. So I think one of the other, especially for people who probably do larger structures like this, I think your mind kind of naturally leads to the question, well, what happens if I need to put holes, or I need to bolt these structures together? How does that play out?
So, I mean, when we first introduced structure system, we first introduced in 2019, but yeah, as a new enhancements in 2019, but that was never a one-year project, right? It was planned for, you know, we kind of knew where R&D was going and what we wanted it to do. Yeah. So there's been enhancements since 2019, 2020, 2021, and actually something that gets me really excited about 2022, and we can talk about it now a little, is that in 2022, we're going to introduce connections in the structure system environment. Nice. And because even though some of those might be welded, you know, when it gets to that big, you know, a lot is bolted together, and you need those connections, you need those plates, you know, so we're introducing that into 2022, which again gets me really excited. So it's basically like a drag and drop your type of connection. It takes care of the holes in it and propagates that to your beams. Yeah, that's one of the highlights. I've kind of been skimming through the what's new 2022, and that's a big one. I'm really excited for that one.
I think it's an exciting one for sure. And actually, I'm going to take a minute just to plug next week, SOLIDWORKS Live. We're going to be looking at 2022. So, you know, if you have not subscribed, if you've not turned on that reminder, be sure to do so that you get reminded and get notified. But be sure to tune in for that. That is going to be a special SOLIDWORKS Live 90 minutes that we're going to be taking a look at many of the what's new features in 2022. As Michelle said, there's been some that have been added to the structure systems. And it sounds like a fair number of people have been interested in this. So this has been really great, Michelle, what you've walked us through today.
Thank you.
Any other tips or tricks you wanna share with us today?
Oh boy.
And if not, that's okay. I just want to give you one last chance.
Nothing comes to mind. I think, I mean, you were saying what, 68% of the people on the session had not used structure systems, so it's already a lot of new for a lot of users. So
yeah, and we just closed the poll. 94% of the people want to be able to want to give this a try. So that's
cool.
That's fantastic.
Well,
so
that's awesome. I'm glad.
Yeah. So great. So Michelle, I want to thank you again for all the time you put into this and for walking us through structure systems. Again, be sure to join us next week as we go through 2022 and some of the awesome new enhancements that are going to be there. The following week, we'll do an overview of some of the 3D experience content. And then the third week, we're going to do an interface tour back inside of SolidWorks. Brad Williamson, who's going to walk us through that. If you've not seen Brad present, you need to be able to be sure to tie into that. Last time, I think he, if I remember correctly, he was drumming and presenting, which was just a whole lot of fun. So you want to make sure that you tie into that one as well. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us today for Live Design, and we'll look forward to seeing you again in an upcoming event.